Hi, bitch besties. It's your main bitch, Melly. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to another episode of the Judgy Bitch Pod. Welcome back to another episode of the Judgy Bitch Pod with our new segment on the page of crime. Welcome back, my co-host, Paige.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for staying on with me. I mean, the bitch besties had to wait a whole week to listen to this episode, but for us, it wasn't even a minute. That's fine. Thank you so much for doing this with me a second time. But this case has so much detail to it. And we still don't know whether or not Scott Peterson killed his wife, Laci Peterson. However, as discussed in the first episode, when you watch the Hulu documentary, you believe that he didn't do it because it's from the point of view of his defense team. But when you watch the Netflix documentary, you believe he did it because the detectives tell their side of story. So Paige and I have been discussing in the first episode the differences between both. We've been giving our opinions, and I just want to point out again, we don't know whether he did it or not. We are not sure. It's very suspicious, his behavior and everything he did and lied and done, but there is no physical evidence. And if you haven't listened to the first episode yet with all the details of what actually happened, I highly recommend to press pause on this one, go back, listen to the first episode, and then come back here and listen to this. Because today we're going to discuss reasonable doubt in this case and playing more devil's advocate. And
That's the
three
common theme.
small gang questions for Paige.
Oh gosh, I'm scared.
No, don't be scared. So as we said in the last episode, he was sentenced to death, convicted of murdering his wife, Laci. However, in the episode of the Hulu documentary, I think the episode is even called Reasonable Doubt, it says his appeal was filed in 2012. He was convicted of murder, sentenced to the death penalty in 2004. So this is almost 8 years later that they filed his appeal. And they say in this part of the documentary, of the Hulu documentary, they say there were 7 pregnant women who disappeared from that area between 1999 and 2002. Laci Peterson disappeared on Christmas Eve of 2002, alongside 7 other pregnant women. And 3 of those 7 other pregnant women who disappeared were from Modesto, the town that Laci disappeared from. 3 other ones. And 4 other ones within an 80 miles radius of Modesto, so in the same proximity. And 1 had disappeared just 6 months before Laci disappeared. And her body was also washed up on the shore in the same condition as Laci Peterson. And her name was Evelyn Hernandez. And her baby was never found. So they believe, due to the way that Connor, Laci's unborn baby, was found, that he was handled outside of the body, of Laci's body. I think that was actually discussed in trial as well, because they believe that because the baby's ear was flapped over and had a piece of tape to his face. And he was also wrapped in whatever, some kind of rope or tape or something. Right?
Yeah, I think it was fishing line earlier. It was electrical tape on his ear, and I want to say it was fishing line, but I could be wrong. But it was more so like wrapped around like a noose.
Yeah. Which then again, the people who believe that Scott murdered Laci, they say, well, she was washed up in the bay after a major storm. There's so much shit and garbage in the water. So of course the baby has some kind of tape and shit on him.
Yeah, I don't know. Yes, that is possible. I just think it's like what a coincidence to have it wrapped around his neck.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think so too. And also tape in salty water that still sticks to the skin. I don't know. They should have tested that, in my opinion. Does it even still stick after it was in the water? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So in this Hulu documentary, they say the airport district is about 1 mile, only 1 mile from Laci's and Scott's house. And the district has the highest crime rates in Modesto. And there were 6 criminal instances that occurred between the night of December 23rd and the morning of December 24th. So just within 1 mile radius, there were 6 criminal instances the night that Laci disappeared. And one of those instances, my brain is broken. I can't talk anymore. One of those instances is 5 blocks from Laci's house. And then they interview in the Hulu documentary Lord Avila, I think is her name. She had a clothing store. She was pregnant at the time, and she saw a car with suspicious men inside the car looking at her in her clothing store for about 30 minutes. And she said they looked like criminals. And she saw one of the guys come into her store, and she felt so threatened that they were coming for her. So she herself was 8 months pregnant. She ran to the back of her store, hiding and calling the police. And the police came, nothing happened to her, thank God. She's fine. But she said after that happened, the police never followed up with her.
Yeah, I remember watching that, and she said that if she wasn't suspicious about their behavior, and called the police, that she potentially could have been Laci, and Laci potentially could still be alive, which was really sad.
Yeah,
Like, she definitely has survivor's guilt, and I can't imagine.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And then in the documentary, they say Laci's sighting was not a priority for the police, although the one nurse that said she saw Laci being followed by those 2 men in the park and the men yelling at her dog to shut up was at 10:45. At trial, the neighbor who found the dog and put it in the backyard said she found a receipt from the day, as we said in the first episode, and retracted her steps and came up with the timeline of it must have been 10:18 when she put the dog in the backyard. But the eyewitnesses seeing Laci after 10:18, the police just assumed those were wrong. That's how it was stated in the Hulu documentary. And then there were handwritten notes from the mailman that were missed by the scanners. And so the attorneys never got to see them. And what it is pretty much is the mailman on his route needs to scan whenever he is at what specific places, right? So they can track his route and, where he was at the time. And he had testified that he saw 25 minutes later, after 10:18, 25 minutes later, he saw that the gate was open and the dog did not bark at him, although Mackenzie the dog barked at him religiously every single day. And this was missed in trial because all those documents were scanned to probably make copies and provide to the attorneys and the prosecution. And I don't know if the jury gets copies too, but those pages apparently were stuck together somehow and the scanner missed them. So this wasn't part of the trial.
Like, how does that happen?
So who opened the gate for the dog to not be there at 25 minutes after the neighbor put the dog in the backyard? So in the documentary, they say it must have been Laci, because who else would do it? Because Scott was proven to be at his computer in the warehouse because he sent an email. And also
Mhm.
he has a parking receipt from the marina, and he was seen by witnesses in the marina. So it couldn't have been Scott who opened the backyard to let the dog out. So who else would have been? And then combined with those witnesses who saw Laci at 2:45, that timeline more tracks than, Laci already being dead by 10:18. That's what they say in the documentary. It's not my opinion. That's what they say. Just want to make that clear. And that's also when the burglaries came into the picture. So the neighbors leave at 10:33 for their Christmas vacation, and then the burglary took place. But because the police had such tunnel vision towards Scott, they believe it took place on December 26th. But that was when at least one media truck was already outside the house. Plus, the burglars were seen by an eyewitness at 11:40 a.m. on December 24th. And then the Volga says during questioning that he had nothing to do with the pregnant girl. And the detective says, well, I'm not here to question you about the pregnant girl. And they went about the Bulgari case. That's also highly suspicious, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure.
But Scott's jury didn't get to hear anything about that. I don't
I
know why.
know.
I don't know why. And then during a prison phone call, it came out that Laci had gone across the street to confront the Bulgars and that they had threatened her. And this was all on tape that the police had received, but the police claims they don't have that tape. And so the tape is missing to this day.
How?
Right.
Like, how? I feel like, yeah, there was just a lot of missing or missed evidence.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the Ellen Greenberg case, right? Where
Right.
evidence was
Like,
missing.
it are, the police officers or whoever's handling the case, are they involved with like a cover up? Or, do they have a bias and like a hatred for Scott because, he potentially murdered his pregnant wife? Or like, I don't know, like, I don't know. I feel if you're handling, that type of evidence, that you would think that you would, handle it with caution. I don't know.
Yeah. You would think so, right?
Yeah, it's very odd.
So one of the tips that came into the volunteer tip line, remember Laci's friends and family created this volunteer search center, whatever, the day after she went missing, and they had this volunteer phone line. So one of the tips that came into that phone line said that a woman was seen outside of a van and appeared to be urinating before putting her back into the van by suspicious looking man. But Scott's sister-in-law was told by the police that this is one of the tips that's irrelevant. How is it irrelevant?
Right. They think they saw a pregnant woman that matches her description.
Yeah. When you're looking for a pregnant woman, like how do you not follow up
Right.
on that tip? It may or may
Right.
not have been Laci, but at least you follow up on that, don't you?
Right. I feel like you should rule out any evidence that you potentially could have. Any eyewitnesses,
Yeah.
like I would follow up on everything that was presented because, who knows? What if?
Yeah. And we don't know for sure whether or not they followed up on this. This again comes from the Hulu documentary, which is very much told from the defense's side. So we have to take this with a grain of salt, right? We don't have the other side's statement for this. But then in this documentary, it was also stated the age of the baby at the time of death is critical as well. And they try to determine it by the size and the size of Laci's last ultrasound. So with a professional developed formula, as we stated in the last episode, they determined the age, but the doctor they used measured the wrong bones and used the wrong formula. So he concluded that Connor lived way past December 24 and may have been alive up to January 3rd, which is completely different than the prosecutor's theory. And that's also odd. If this one expert doesn't stand trial, I think because he didn't survive the questioning on trial, why don't you bring another one? Can you not bring another expert? I don't know.
There has to be more than one.
That's weird to me, but I feel like this is such a crucial part because if they can prove that the baby lived past December 24, well, then obviously it wasn't Scott. So I feel like this is like a key point they
Right.
should really dig into. And then also, as we discussed in the first episode about the jury members, when the foreman was released, and I believe Strawberry Shortcake, how the media called this jury member because of her looks. When she came in, he was the last jury member to come in. And it turned out that she had filed a protection order for her unborn child at 4 months pregnant. And the assumption is that she came in preconceived into this case because she was so strongly against Scott and also kept calling Connor, the baby, little man.
Yeah.
That's what's stated in this documentary. How do you feel about this?
Again, going back to the theme that we were talking about before, I think this was super biased of her to even consider going on this trial. I think, the jury pool, like, it should have been vetted way different and, just completely, I don't know. The fact that she related so much to this case, like, how is she allowed to be on this trial?
Yeah, I think
I
so
don't know.
too.
It's
I
very
don't know how
odd.
much they dig into the jurors' past and how much they investigate the
Right.
jurors. I don't know the process of that.
Yeah. I've never been on jury selection, so I don't know. I've always wanted to be, but I never get picked. But, I mean, not that I would wanna be on a murder trial, you know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, like, certain questions. Like, I know my mom's brother was murdered, so, like, anytime she would ever get picked for it, she would just say, like, she's biased.
Hmm.
I don't know if it goes more into detail. I don't know if she, like, says, like, "Hey, my brother was murdered." But, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just and it's like, did you say this before you were picked? Probably not. So then, of course, you're coming out for, like, coming forward afterwards and saying, "Hey, I had this opinion. I've
Yeah.
had this experience. This is why I chose that." So, I don't know.
There's no question about Scott's weird, suspicious behavior, right? That's why we keep repeating ourselves. We don't know whether or not he did it. He was convicted because of his suspicious behavior. There is no physical evidence in this case. But I don't know if you had a chance yet. What we learned from the narcissism episode that I did with Lauren, the self esteem counselor, is also that a narcissist, he lies so much and so well that he believes his own lies,
Yep.
and he is so emotionally detached. I don't want to diagnose him from afar, especially since I'm not a professional, but knowing that from the episode with Lauren, the self-esteem counselor, maybe he is a narcissist and maybe he believes his own lies and is so emotionally detached because he is a narcissist.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he definitely has
Maybe.
those characteristics.
Yeah. But then why does his family still believe him? Why are they still fighting so much for him?
Maybe they're under his spell. Like, a narcissist, can have them believe certain things. So they definitely could be under his little spell. But I don't know. Maybe they truly think he is innocent.
I can see how both sides believe their truth, right? I
Hmm.
can see if you believe that he is guilty, why you believe that, because there is all this suspicious behavior and somehow the puzzle pieces kind of work together, right? But if
Yeah.
you believe that he's innocent, I can also see why you believe that he's innocent because there are so many questions about the evidence and the police behavior. And I kind of see both sides in this. I cannot make up my mind what to believe in this. How do you feel?
Yeah. I feel like I'm right there with you. I think he's a shitty person. He cheated on his pregnant wife and he potentially murdered her. Um, but yeah, like I said in the last episode, I don't know if I was a juror on trial or on for his trial, if I could confidently say, yes, he's 100% guilty. Yes, he deserves the death penalty. I think a lot of evidence was missed. I think a lot of people were extremely biased. The media played a huge role. They, presented everything as fact when in fact it wasn't. So I think, right there, like, it's just everyone already had this opinion, especially because he is the husband and she was pregnant. And, the statistics of being pregnant is higher to be murdered while not being pregnant. But yeah, I go back and forth. Like you said, like, I can see him being guilty, but I can also see him potentially being innocent. I don't know. I definitely have reasonable doubt, which is why I don't think I could convict him.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point I was gonna make next, or the question I was gonna ask you next. Be I mean, obviously, we didn't see everything that the jury got to see in trial, right? Because it wasn't, cameras weren't allowed. But from what we know from these documentaries, if I were on the jury, what does reasonable doubt mean, right? Is what we are feeling right now, is that reasonable doubt to not convict
Yeah.
him?
Yeah. We can't 100% certainly say he did this. There is some form of doubt. So I am shocked that they got to the guilty verdict. 100% all 12. Just based off of prosecution only having that she potentially died on the 23rd. And then they just changed the narrative of him killing his pregnant wife because he wanted to start a new life. There was no DNA evidence. So it still blows my mind that they all came to the guilty verdict. I don't know.
I don't know either, but since you mentioned the DNA evidence, I mean, there is the hair on the pliers that they found in his boat, right? But the
Hmm.
theory is that he wrapped her in this tarp and put her on the back of his truck and put umbrellas on top. We didn't mention that in the first episode, but that was mentioned in the documentary. Why don't they DNA test the tarp then if they believe she was wrapped in it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, as a female, like we shed like crazy to
Yeah.
explain why one strand of hair was in pliers at his warehouse is very odd. I just feel as though there would definitely be more evidence or some type of DNA, additional DNA of hers if he did it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
It was also said in one of the documentaries that they believe that Scott must have strangled her because there is no DNA evidence or anything, and strangulation doesn't really leave any like blood splatter or whatever, right? But from what we know from other crime scenes in strangulation cases, wouldn't there be defensive wounds on him? And I haven't heard anything that he had any scratches or anything on him.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't either. So, yeah, I don't know. Unless he caught her off guard or, potentially smothered her with a pillow. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know.
Smothering with a pillow, there would be evidence on the pillow. There would be,
Right.
But I also want to ask you in regards to the media frenzy and this being such a public case and everything. When I watched the Hulu documentary, which I watched first, I was convinced he's innocent. Do you think all those people and also the people that were outside the courthouse and shouting and like, cheering when he was sentenced and all that, if they were now so many years later come back to watch that, do you think they would change their mind now?
Yes and no. I think, a percentage certainly would. Um, but I want to say a good bit probably won't, only because they're probably so convinced that he did do it. I was actually talking about this with my grandma, and she was like, "Oh, I hate him. Like, he definitely did it. Like, XYZ." And I was like, "Well, actually," but she's convinced that he is, and I don't think she'll ever be convinced that he didn't. So,
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it also just goes by, if you're open to new evidence or opinions. I don't know. Like, maybe it's like that generation, you know what I mean? Like, it could be a generational thing. It could be, misinformation, education,
yeah,
whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I would like to say yes, but I don't think so.
yeah. I wonder also if this case would be retrialed now, if there would be a different outcome so many years later. And, if they find different jurors and there's not such a media frenzy anymore. I wonder if there would be a different outcome now.
Yeah, I wonder that too, only because, and it's especially like right now, like if they did a retrial, because I know his family has been trying to do to get a retrial. I'm wondering because it's not so fresh in the media, it's not always covered, that pool of people, most likely, like, a lot of them aren't gonna be in that area still. It has been, what, 20, can't do math, 24 years, so time has passed. Um, I don't know, I wonder, I think it would be different, I really do. Yeah, I do. I
Hmm.
think the verdict would be different, at least like a mistrial.
Yeah, I believe so too. Do you think the police, what we heard in the first episode, right, where it was stated in the documentary that the police kept feeding bits and bytes to the media that wasn't necessarily all the truth, but the media ran with it and painted him as such a cruel monster? Do you think having that in the back of your mind and also hearing the detective's interviews and making light of the fact that he retracted from the police report that Lacey was at the warehouse and made it sound in court that she was never there, although there was a witness stating that she used the bathroom and all this, and the detective making light of it and like laughing about it a little bit, right? Do you think the police had an involvement in this case somehow and they messed it up?
If they necessarily messed it up, um, I think they certainly were biased against him because he was her husband. And like I said previously, that statistically, the spouse is usually the number one suspect. Um, my thing is, did the police actually explore all of the possible situations that could have happened? Were there any other suspects? Were there, any other concerns that they should have looked into? Um,
That's my biggest question too. If the police had blinders on and didn't investigate other possibilities what could have happened, like as we stated, the other pregnant women missing in that area, the burglary across the street sounds suspicious with the date keep changing. That's weird.
mhm.
And I also wonder, first question, I think I asked you that in a previous case. Does that make you question our system a little bit? And second question is, should there be laws or anything done, any regulations, any train, whatever, anything done to prevent this from happening over and over again, that the police can mess up cases like this?
I think there's always going to be cases where we think that it should have been handled one way versus another. Um, and I think I would hope that, if they made a mistake on this case, that they would then take that, learn from it, and then move on and, try and handle other cases differently. But I also think that there is definitely room for improvement, and that goes for anyone. I mean, crime investigating, evidence, evaluations, like everything is evolving. So the investigating portion, the evidence handling, like all of that should then therefore evolve. So I think, yeah, there's definitely errors, right? Like there's errors in the system. But again, I think it's like a situational issue that can be improved. I don't have enough knowledge regarding like the actual process of certain things, but yeah, like you said, like how it keeps happening, I think there definitely is room for improvement.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes 100% sense. And I don't know if it's just the two of us keep picking cases where we can point out that something went wrong with the police.
I
But
know.
also when I tried to compare it to the Idaho murder case, right, where the internet went wild, TikTok specifically went wild investigating the case and accusing, remember the guy from the food truck and everything, and they accused him. I also wonder if there should be any laws or whatever in place to protect from the media, internet, TikTok, whoever, getting too much information during an investigation case. But on the other hand, there can also, of course, be very helpful
Right.
to have the media coverage and get more witnesses and tips and whatnot. So it's such a two-sided sword, almost such a thin line between. But in cases like this, I almost feel like the police had such blinders on Scott and
Mhm.
fed the media in this way. So the entire world hated him and thought he was guilty. And that definitely didn't help this particular case. I don't have a solution for this. I'm just throwing it out there for discussion. I feel like something needs to be done somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I didn't even Yeah, I mean, TikTok, they have their own crime, like, researchers and all that, and,
Yeah.
they think that they solve crimes or whatever, or bring up questions that, like, the average person wouldn't have thought. Like you said, like, I definitely think it has its pros and cons, but for the Idaho 4 case, I did read that, like, the TikTok investigators technically were hurting the case as opposed to helping. So, who knows? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
who
And in
knows
this
if it's
particular case, they also pointed it out in the documentary when they were talking about Nancy Grace, right? They were saying Nancy Grace at that time had such a media presence and she kept reporting on it, but she
Mhm.
didn't report objectively about it. She acted like a prosecutor. She was the one prosecuting Scott in front of the public before the trial even happened. Wouldn't you
Yep.
agree?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even when there was evidence that he had the cement to create the weights or the
The
anchors,
anchor? Yeah.
and then the remaining cement he used for his driveway or whatever. And Nancy Grace was, like, so against it, like, didn't believe it, and then even when they brought her to the house, showed her where the cement was used, she kind of just like, "Huh," and then never spoke of it again. It's kind of like, okay, like, you were proven wrong, but you're not gonna go back and then kind of, like, clean up
Debunk
the
it.
mess. Yeah, like, and I feel like that happened a lot with this case, and pretty much all cases, is that, like, when the media has one fact, again, they're presenting it as fact, that they don't go back and correct it, and it's like, you're literally preaching that this is fact, so people are gonna believe it. So if you don't go back and correct that misinformation, like, people are still gonna have these opinions and they're wrong. You know what I mean? They're not really opinions at that point, they're wrong. I don't know, it
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense.
I agree with you. And that's why I feel like people like Nancy Grace, who have such a public reach and they spread so much misinformation. And then, it's like the first domino stone falling. Then they have such a hard time finding jury members because everything is so biased of what the media has reported. I almost feel like they should be held accountable in hindsight. Media reporters like Nancy Grace, who then were proven of not debunking false information like the cement mix, where Scott had said he made one anchor and used the rest of the cement mix to fill in potholes in his driveway. And Nancy Grace was seen on TV. Really? Really? No, that's bullshit. And then, as you say, they take Nancy Grace to the house and show her clearly, look, that's clearly the cement mix. And she's like, but never debunks it. And I feel like those are proven cases where
Yeah,
they could hold her accountable, in my opinion.
right. Yeah, I agree. I wanna
I
know,
don't know.
like,
But then also, you want the freedom of speech for the media and the press, right? You don't want to put any limitations on them either, because we're in America. That's part of our democracy. So I don't really have a solution. I'm just sharing my thoughts on that.
yeah. No, I mean, and yeah, I guess that's, like, the downside of free speech. Not
Yeah.
that, like, we don't wanna hear other people's opinions because everyone's entitled, but yeah, it's more so, like, make sure you're presenting facts and make sure you can prove that, or, like, have, evidence to back it up.
Yeah. As we are sitting here on the Judgy Bitch Pod and our
I know.
backup is documentaries.
Revolving back to, um, the police having blinders for the case and, like, only really investigating Scott is, like, were they aware that, the 7 women were abducted and went missing? Like, did they potentially, like, look into, like, a serial killer or, whatever, like, investigate, like, all of those theories involving that? Because, like, what are the odds that 7 women go missing, specifically in that area? Like, that just seems, extremely high to me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. Just a thought.
yeah. I don't know if that was discussed in court because I feel like this is definitely a make or break in the case where those other women. But I
Yeah.
also wanted to mention that now I believe the LA Innocence Project got involved in his case.
Yeah, they
And not
did.
that that proves anything, but in my opinion, they have so many potential cases, so many people reach out to them for help that I believe they would only pick a case where they believe there is actual reasonable doubt and they might be able to help and be successful. So for me, it kind of shows when the Innocent Project gets involved in this case, maybe they see some reasonable doubt in this. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I that was actually my opinion as well. I think, if they are willing to reinvestigate it, that they definitely have some insight. I don't think they would just grab up any case, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I want to talk about baby Connor again. I know we discussed this earlier in this episode and in the first episode, but there's something that I read on Reddit that I want to share with you. So remember we discussed that there was this formula and the measurement of the bones, and there was all this discussion about when was the baby born? Did it live outside of Laci's body or not? On Reddit, I read that, and that's kind of morbid to talk about a little bit. But when Laci's body was found and an autopsy was done, they said that her cervix wasn't open and there's no cut into her uterus. So they believe there's no way the baby was removed from her body or she didn't give birth to the baby. They believe because the body was so long in water, and there's no other cases to compare such a pregnant woman being so long in the water with to know how the body would react. But they believe because the body was so long in the water that the decomposition started and the baby kind of like swam out on the top of her belly because, there was the skin
Well,
resolving or whatever.
yeah.
But I only read this on Reddit. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know if that's actual facts. I didn't hear about this in any of the documentaries. I wonder, though, why it wasn't addressed in any of the documentaries and why it wasn't addressed in court. If there was an autopsy done on the body, how do they believe the baby came out? Like, why wasn't that addressed?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting. I didn't know that. I never heard of that take, but yeah, I don't know. That's very
But that
interesting.
also like speaks if the cervix was closed and there was no cut into the uterus, then clearly she was killed with the baby inside her body. And that also said on Reddit the baby was in such better condition because it wasn't in the water for as long as Laci
For as
was.
long.
And that is, I'm sorry to talk about this, is very morbid, but also it was said so many times that just her torso was found. What does that mean? Does it mean her head wasn't attached?
Correct.
So they
Her
can't
head.
see any strangulation mark or anything, right?
No, her head, her arms, and legs were missing.
So her head, arms, and legs were missing.
Yeah, so that's what they were trying to paint the picture that he cut up her body, and used the different anchors to weigh down her body parts, which
Yeah.
is
And
very
where would he
sickening.
cut up the body? Like where? Where's the evidence for that? Where's the DNA that because when you cut into a body, there's a lot of blood.
Right. Yeah.
I always thought, and I'm sorry, I pictured that little morbidly, that if it was him and he put the weights on her, he put a weight on her neck, arms and legs. And then because of decomposition, the anchors holding down those parts, is that why the torso came loose somehow and swam up, or that's
Yeah.
how I
I
kind of
mean,
picture it.
yeah, what water does to the body, especially after like so much time, um, that is a possibility. Like we don't really know exactly what happened, but like decomposition is very quick when it comes to the water. So who knows? I mean, we really have no idea. I don't know if they were able to prove like, there was clean cut lines or anything like that just because of the state of the body or the state of the torso. So, yeah, I don't know. I never heard of that type of theory. Like if they like try to like, you know, say any
Yeah.
other way that it's done.
I heard somewhere, and I forgot where it was, that it was discussed if sea life could have like chewed up her arms.
Yeah, right. And aside from that is what I meant. Like I didn't really hear like any other like views
Theories.
on it was yeah, on how it was done.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's so many questions I still have. I do have a Google update on the latest on the case that I can read to you. And it says Scott Peterson was resentenced in 2021 after his death penalty was overturned. And as of 2025, he continues to fight his conviction with the help from the LA Innocence Project. It stated, that's what I just mentioned, Connor wasn't born due to Laci's cervix being closed, no surgical cut to the uterus. And apparently there was, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, meconium or whatever in Connor's system. That's apparently liquid that happens in childbirth.
I don't know. I don't have kids.
I don't know. And then, interestingly, it's I think that it must have been from Reddit or something. A 15.5-inch piece of duct tape was found adhering to Laci Peterson's pants during her autopsy. And that was previously tested. And as of May 2024, a California judge ruled it can be tested for DNA. And while the tape was initially examined in 2004, the new, more advanced testing is part of a motion by Scott Peterson's defense. But I didn't find any outcome from the testing, so I don't know. But then CNN reported key details on the duct tape testing. Initial findings: the duct tape was found on Laci's pants on the right thigh when her remains were discovered, and it was previously found to have human DNA on it, but not enough to produce usable profile. And then the new testing ordered in May 2024 of the San Mateo County Superior Court Judge Elizabeth Hill approved the retesting of this specific piece of duct tape. And she did deny other evidence. And it says, while the duct tape testing was approved, the judge denied requests to test other items, including a mattress that was found in a burned out van and other tape and tarps found in the San Francisco Bay. Why would she deny that?
I don't know. I don't know. I really have no idea.
That to me is like, I don't want to make wrong accusations, all allegedly, and just my thoughts that I'm sharing here. But it almost sounds to me like the judge, Elizabeth Hill, might be biased and think he is guilty. So why do you bother me with all these questions? Stop bringing me more and more petitions. All right, go ahead, do this, but no, the other stuff, like, leave me alone. That's how I
Right.
feel about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. That's all I have, Paige. Do
That's
you have any
all.
2.5 hours later? That's all I have. Do you have anything that I haven't mentioned yet?
Let me see.
Or do you have anything you want to say that we haven't addressed yet?
I wanted to point out that Modesto's motto is water, wealth, contentment, and health, but people that live there say it's murder, meth, and auto theft. I think this kind of goes back into the fact that like Modesto was presented as like this like quiet little area where like crime didn't occur, and this white pregnant woman was murdered, but in reality like it was a high crime area, and there is other possibilities, not just that her husband did it. And then like relating back to Evelyn Hernandez, who was also 8.5 months pregnant. I think it was just her torso that was discovered also in the San Francisco Bay, same place that Laci was found. Um, and when I was mentioning previously that, did they look into like potential serial killers or anything like that? Like the fact that these are two women in the same area, same around the same age, um, both pregnant, and then also the other missing people. What was it? 7 people that went missing in a certain time frame. Like, yes, there's indications that Scott potentially could have murdered her, but just because of all these, similarities, I don't know. I feel like there's more. Like, what if there was another murderer that, potentially wasn't caught and is not behind bars, and then we have this person who's potentially innocent? Like, we have no idea. So I just wanted to add that. Okay. I'm just gonna summarize basically what I've been saying the last 2 episodes. As much as a shitty person I think Scott Peterson is, I don't know without a doubt that I would be able to convict him just based off of the findings that we have presented and the actual trial evidence itself, because there's no DNA evidence aside from one strand of hair that the prosecution had, and then their argument that he just wanted to start a new family with his girlfriend. I don't know if that was strong enough to convict. Obviously, he was convicted, but I think this day and age, I don't know if that would stand trial today. So, as much as I want to say that, yes, I think he's guilty, I don't know, but I don't think he's guilty in the sense that he deserved death.
Yeah, I agree with you. I cannot make up my mind whether or not I think he's guilty or not guilty. There's a high possibility that he did it because of his suspicious behavior and the way that he was proven to be a liar and all that. But on the other side, I understand of people thinking that he is not guilty because there is so much reasonable doubt in those other missing cases and so much evidence that wasn't presented in court. All those questions we have about the baby inside or outside the body and all that. So I understand both sides. I don't know which side I'm leaning more towards. And so I don't know. I have no idea.
I know. It's definitely a case that, like, it could literally go either way. And
Yeah,
that's what's so frustrating about it, because it's like, well, what if he is a murderer? Do you want to, like, defend a murderer? But then it's like, well, what if he isn't? And then he's spending the rest of his life in prison. Like, you don't know what to
right.
choose. It's hard.
Yeah. And where's the actual murder? If he isn't the murderer, who is? Right? And why is
Right.
he still free? Yeah, I agree with you. And I have a lot of opinions and questions surrounding this whole media spectacle, surrounding the police involvement and missing evidence. Once again, we found a case with missing evidence. Um, that also bothers me and keeps me awake at night, but it's nothing that you and I can solve. We're not investigators. We don't want to accuse anybody. We just want to share our opinions and our thoughts on the things that were shared with us in public available documentaries. And I think my closing argument, I'm going to say thank you so much, Paige, to be my co-host on the segment on the Page of Crime. I think we had a fantastic first 2 episodes. There was the perfect case to make a debut for the On the Page of Crime. I also want to tell the bitch besties who are watching, pay special attention to the logo we are using. And I want to invite everybody to write to us with other cases you'd like us to discuss on here, or if you have opinions and takes that you want to share and you would like to be a guest on here, we would welcome having a guest, do it a 3-way podcast.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
I think that's everything.
Thanks, Bitch Bestie, for listening and watching. Thank you, co-host Paige. See you next time for On the Page of Crime. Bye, Bitch Besties.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Bitch Besties, for listening. Make sure to follow us at the Judgy Bitch Pod. And hey, spread the word. Tell your friends, your ex, your dog walker. We'd love the support. Want to be part of the show? DM us your feedback, hot takes, or unapologetic opinions. We just might read them on air. And don't forget to follow, rate, and review the pod. See you next week. Cheers, bitches.